My guest at this time is Dave Brat. He served as a congressman from Virginia's 7th Congressional District for a couple of terms, and he is now the dean of the business school at Liberty University. We want to get his insights onto the first few months of the new Congress, and also what is the role of the Freedom Caucus, which Mr. Brat was a prominent member of, now that the GOP is in the minority in the House of Representatives. And Dave, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, Greg, great to be on. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you're enjoying the private sector as much as you enjoyed serving your constituents up on Capitol Hill. But let's talk about the role of the Freedom Caucus here. It's been in the news the last couple of days because Justin Amash, who is another prominent member, publicly called for an impeachment inquiry into the president and was rebuked in a way by the caucus, and now he's resigned from it. So particularly now with Republicans not calling the shots in the House, what do you see as the role of the Freedom Caucus right now?
Yeah, well, I think the Freedom Caucus stands for conserving and constructing all the things that made this country great. And that, unfortunately, that's not in right now, right? Policy in terms of the left is deconstructing the Judeo-Christian tradition. They're deconstructing the rule of law, and they're deconstructing capitalism and free markets. And so the role of the Freedom Caucus is just to stand in the gap there. And unfortunately, we're in the minority, but all of those folks believe in those principles. And so we need to do better at the ballot box and get the word out. The left is just at war in terms of politics. They go straight to character assassination and those kind of things to win elections. And conservatives in our leadership needs to do a better job of framing the issues at the national level. Last cycle, the health care issue was huge, and we had pre-existing conditions covered in our bill, but our leadership didn't put that out enough. And so we need to do a better job, even when you're in the minority, of telling the American people how much good policy matters. And the left right now is just way off target, and I think the American people are finally starting to see that. And so I feel optimistic coming up. You know, the debt and deficits and the economic growth right now is super, and it's never covered. The unemployment rate is so low that just across the board, we have good news. We're hitting on all cylinders, and a lot of that's due to the Trump tax cuts. And so that's all great news, but we need to trumpet that daily. And I'm working at Liberty in the business school. And, of course, we believe in all three of those pillars that made the country great: the Judeo-Christian tradition, the rule of law, uplifting the police officers, sheriffs, everybody, first servers, responders. And then the free market system is under attack. And it's just amazing that when China is moving toward freedom and the U.S. is actually contemplating socialism, and it's on the front page of the papers. And so I don't get what the hang-up is, but the voter has to eventually come back our way, I would think.
What do you make of criticism, to some extent from the right, but obviously much of it from the left and maybe even the middle, that the Republicans and to some extent even the Freedom Caucus, given the rebuke of Justin Amash, has been less about principle lately and more about simply defending the president?
I don't buy that. My own time in Congress, I stood firm on the principles and policy and ran on that. And unfortunately, when the left goes after, they just bring up, race and gender and the hatred and all that kind of thing. And the press knows it's not true either, right? We all get along. The Republicans and Democrats get along personally. We work out in the weight room in the mornings. We all get along. But the press is just overwhelmingly left. And they hit conservative. You just go look at the usual. You have Politico and Roll Call and The Hill and all the tabloids. They never give any credit to the conservative side for anything. And so part of it's just messaging. Conservatives have to do a better job of messaging and putting in place the institutions, right? The left has taken over all the institutions, right? K-12, higher education, the media, all the mainstream media is owned by the left. And the money was raining down from heaven last cycle on the left. They had the energy, but we can turn that around, and we have to do a better job on the messaging.
Speaking of the messaging, what do you make of the public messaging? And you said obviously it could be improved, but the public messaging thus far of the House leadership. It's an interesting position they find themselves in now because the president, of course, is a member of their own party, and he obviously takes up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to GOP messaging, and the Republicans also control the Senate. So it seems like Kevin McCarthy's been quieter than previous Republican leaders when they've been in the minority, But historically, those Republican leaders in the minority have been pretty vocal about, well, if we had the power, we would be doing this. And they seem generally more strident than when they actually have the power. So what do you make of McCarthy and his team so far?
Well, that's right. I mean, I'm waiting to see a new, contract with America, Newt Gingrich, et cetera, that kind of formulation of exactly what are we going to push when we get there. When you say you're going to repeal Obamacare, and then when you're put in power, you have to do that. That's 1/5 of the economy is just bureaucratically being run by D.C. And we have a winning message, right? I mean, it's very interesting. The left, Bernie Sanders, all the way through Trump. The American people know D.C. has been captured by the money and special interests, and yet the American people don't see that most of the money now is on the left. And even big business, right, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, is just protecting narrow business interests. They're not protecting free markets. And so a lot of the big business folks say, yeah, I'm in favor of big, free markets in general, but they're not in favor of free markets when it comes to their own business. And we have to have the courage and the backbone to live out our creed, because it is good for the world, right? China is growing like crazy as they move toward freedom on the economic side. They're not moving toward freedom on the political side. And the president is right, because if we don't check them and make them play by the rules, since World War II, right, we set up the Bretton Woods, the liberal order. Liberals should be in favor of this, right, where you have free trade, and President Trump has said he's in favor of getting rid of all tariffs if the rest of the world will do that. And so he set out some good markers that will produce massive growth, et cetera, but the left has no interest in that. They have very narrow special interests that favor them, and they say yes to everything. And so you haven't heard a word about deficits or debt or anything from the press, because the left is all the presidential candidates on the left, right, the 20 of them, they're all proposing $1 trillion plus proposals across the board on clean environment, et cetera. And some of them are up in the 30 trillion to 100 trillion proposals, Elizabeth Warren, et cetera. And those numbers are so big, I don't think the American people actually think that that it's credible. And we need to show it's not credible. You cannot do that. You will sink the machine, and you'll slow down the engine that is producing all the jobs right now. And the kids, I'm at Liberty University, dean of the business school, and the job front right now is great. The prospects are great for our students and alums, et cetera. The economy is kicking in on all cylinders, and we want to keep it that way.
Dave, as I mentioned, and you just mentioned again, you're the dean of the business school at Liberty University, so you're around these kids all the time, and I'm guessing the demographics of Liberty are a little more to the right than the typical young people of that age, which generally trend to the left. And so the question is, what do they want to hear? Regardless of their political persuasion, what do they want to hear from their leaders in terms of addressing what matters to them? This is a massive rising generation. And you've got two guys in their 70s who are likely to be facing each other for president of the United States next year, leading a lot of people to wonder whether they're paying attention to what matters to that generation. They're going to differ on what the solutions are, but when you talk to these kids, what are they most concerned about?
Well, I think the younger generation, they get along with their parents now. It's a good new day. Our kids are very ethical, and they want to construct and keep the things that made America great, but they're looking for authenticity, and they want to see that if you believe something. That's why a lot of the left is attracted to Bernie, right? That a lot of the young kids go that route because he's internally consistent. The problem is externally, socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried, and so he's consistent and authentic to socialism in a big state. And the left and the press is all concerned with fascism all the time. Fascism requires a big state. And so the conservatives and the freedom types like me, we want a small state. We want businesses to thrive. And the bigger the state gets, the worse businesses do, right? India and China are the success story of the last 20, 30 years. They've brought 2 billion people, right? They've 7 billion people on the planet. 2 billion people have come out of poverty due to free markets. And we need to trumpet that. So the left is always making a moral case and an ethical case when we have all the evidence on the moral and ethical side. We have made life better for 2 billion people, all children of God. And I'm extremely proud of that, but I don't think the word is getting out. So it's all messaging. We got to get the money to win races again, and then we've got a message on our message is a total winner.
Last question, and you just mentioned the folks on the really far side of the left scale that are now in the House of Representatives and elsewhere, a lot of them running for president too. Some folks say that the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world kind of took a page out of the Tea Party / Freedom Caucus playbook. They're kind of a pain to their leaders who don't think that the country ought to go in the direction they want. Obviously, you guys are 180 polar degrees opposite in your ideology and so forth. But what do you make of the comparison?
Well, there's a little something to it, but they call us hard right or whatever in the Freedom Caucus, et cetera, and that's just kind of a term of derision. When we ran on balancing budgets, the deficit right now is $1 trillion every single year. We're running deficits of $1 trillion a year, right? The Fed has $4 trillion on its balance sheet still, and that we need to wind that down. And so they can call you far right, but we're with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and James Madison and the founders, the Constitution, Milton Friedman on economics. We're with the folks who got it right, Ronald Reagan and the left, or Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, I have a prediction for you that's kind of interesting. I think she's going to get in the way of the money. And money, I'm talking, starts with a T, with $1 trillion. And if she gets too much in the way of the $1 trillion money in D.C., they'll ride her out of town as well, because the city is run by those powerful special interests and the money. And I think everybody knows that. So that'll be an interesting test to see whether she can survive. And, she's proposing policy that she never has to explain in a public setting, and she can't, for more than a sentence or two. She can't sustain that case. And so I think there's a huge difference. The Freedom Caucus is founded on all the substantive issues that made the country great. We can explain ourselves and are willing. We'd love to do it out in the public realm. And the left, unfortunately, the press does not hold them up to the same internal consistency.
Dave, always great to talk with you, sir. Thanks for walking us through how you see the current state of affairs up on Capitol Hill and beyond. And we look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Hey, great to be on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Former Virginia Congressman Dave Brat. He is now Dean of the Business School at Liberty University. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.